I do want to take a quick moment before we get started on our agenda today. First of all, as we must continue to do, in terms of the remote meeting procedures, in keeping with an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency as amended by Governor Baker on February 12th, 2022, this meeting is being conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count toward quorum. The meeting may be broadcast, so that is not applying. So we have handled our duties and responsibilities. And before we get too much into our business tonight, I do want to welcome a new member, somebody who is joining us, Rory Caulfield, as the representation of the Conservation Commission. And I'm sure many of you know Rory. I can see some smiles of acknowledgement, but not all of you may know Rory. So Rory, I just wanted to give you a minute or two to introduce yourself and let people know a little bit about you and kind of what you do for us, especially in the community.
Sure, absolutely. So I am currently the chair of the Conservation Commission. I've been on the commission for about 5 years now, chair for the last 2.5 or so. And it's a lot of work, as you can imagine. I also spent time on the 524 Depot Street Committee when that was going on a few years ago. We presented a master plan to the select board. So I'm well aware of what the CPC does. I've been in Easton for 30 plus years. First moved here when my wife and I got married. She's a resident, a long-term resident of Easton, going back to childhood. So I have 3 kids that went through the school system here in Easton, and a proud resident. So I'm looking to contribute in other ways as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, Rory, and for committing more of your time to the service of the community. It's appreciated. So tonight, we'll start off with our minutes like we normally do. I've reviewed the executive session minutes, and all of the ones that have previously not been released, I would deem should also continue to not be released, as they contain discussions on matters that we are still pursuing. I will take a motion to accept the February 10th, 2022 regular session minutes. If somebody would so like to make that motion in a second.
I can move that.
I'll second that.
So that's moved by John and by a hair, seconded by Lee, but Ed Hands was there very close for a backup on the second if needed.
I heard you, Dennis. I heard you too.
Dennis, I missed that one too, Dennis. So good to have everybody jumping. So Jim Lee.
Aye.
Greg Strange.
Aye.
Rory Caulfield.
Aye.
Ed Hands.
Aye.
Tom Broussard's an aye. Dennis Sheedy.
Aye.
John Ventresco.
Aye.
Amanda Varela.
Aye.
I do not think Meredith has joined yet. Confirmed. Okay. Next up is the executive session minutes from February 10th. And I would entertain taking a motion to accept but not release, as those minutes contain discussions on matters we continue to pursue as well. If somebody would like to make such a motion and then a second.
So moved.
Second. Sheedy.
So Hands and Sheedy, and through the same process, Jim Lee.
Aye.
Greg Strange.
Aye.
Rory Caulfield.
Abstain.
Ed Hands.
Aye.
Tom Broussard's an aye. Dennis Sheedy.
Aye.
John Ventresco.
Aye.
Amanda Varela.
Aye.
And Meredith Keach is here. Meredith, we are voting to accept the executive session minutes but not release from February 10th. If you would like to say aye, abstain, or nay.
Aye.
Thank you kindly and welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent. Next up, we do have Wendy Nightingale waiting in the wings to help support us with the next 2 items. We have 2 CPA applications, pretty standard, I believe, but do appreciate you joining, Wendy. I know sometimes what you think might be standard could actually begin discussions down other avenues. But Stephanie and Wendy together, I think, can probably lead us through. We do have the CPA budget article. the CPA budget article, in essence, has appropriations in terms of administrative expenses of roughly $101,000, debt service of roughly $506,000, reserves of roughly $488,000. By way of explanation, the article is basically proposing the fiscal year 2023 budget for the CPC. The amounts to be funded would be considered separate appropriations. And what we are looking for is a recommendation. Before I do that, though, I did want to afford Wendy, Stephanie, and certainly the team the opportunity to engage on it and have any discussion that might be warranted. Wendy, is there any other information or thoughts that you might want to share, or Stephanie?
Well, Wendy and I talked this afternoon. She's here to answer questions the committee might have regarding the articles. I also know she's prepared a little presentation to kind of go through the numbers, and I think that would be helpful to everyone before considering the articles.
Well said. Perfect, Wendy. Thank you so much for preparing the presentation. And if you want to take over the screen and share it so we can follow along, that would be great.
Okay, great. I can do that. Before I begin, though, have all of the projects been voted on that are going to town meeting?
All of, yes, essentially, yes.
I don't think 555 Foundry Street has, though. Thank you.
Right, but that's a new application still under consideration, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, because I just didn't want to be presumptive, because I did factor those into the numbers that are going to go into this budget article.
So I think it's probably fair to say, if I think, Stephanie, what you're saying is if we did proceed on the 555 Foundry Street, the numbers that are being presented would change.
It's possible that they could change. I guess it would depend on how much it is, because you could also just appropriate from unreserved fund balance.
Fair.
And then you wouldn't have to touch this article. But I just wanted to make sure that the projects that I did incorporate into here have been approved. But I guess we'll find that out as we go along. Absolutely.
Well said. I know, for example, the pickleball courts we've approved and we're waiting to get back finalized bids that may tweak things before we get. So I think the takeaway for our committee is that what Wendy is presenting is largely as we know it now. And to the extent that there are new data points for the fact pattern to come in the future, it would obviously affect what Wendy had presented today. So that's a good point.
My little buttons, I'm just on my laptop, so my little buttons that I would normally press are being hidden by the Zoom screen. There we go. Okay, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I guess we'll go back to this article because I know we're going to talk about the budget right now, but before, after we get into the budget, there is another article where there's going to be that need to appropriate additional funds for fiscal 22.
Yes.
So we can go back to this slide after the fact. So for fiscal 23, the surcharge that I would propose be estimated is $1,575,000. We're at about $1.5 million for this fiscal year, and it increased. The net surcharge increased about $76,000. So, a $75,000 increase would seem appropriate. The trust fund distribution at this point, I would estimate $400,000. Again, that's one of those items that you just never really know how much it's going to be until, much closer to, really basically after you vote the budget is when you kind of find out when you're going to get the money from the state. And then once we do get the state, because that distribution usually comes end of October, beginning of November. It's usually, right before we set the tax rate. And so even if we estimate 400,000 here, if we got 500,000 from the state, when we prepare a tax recap, we have to report CPA activities on that, and we would have to change the estimate to whatever we received. So I think at this point, 400,000 is reasonable, especially given what we received this year, which was considerably more, and then the year before that. So the last couple of years, the amounts have been increasing, which is great.
And so that's at 25%. And you're saying that's loosely, slightly conservative versus where we recently have been, but more in line with historical
Yes.
contributions. Got it.
Yeah, and I mean, this year I think was kind of unusual because even after they announced what we were going to get, there was an additional supplemental distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So the number this year is definitely quite high, but I would not anticipate that it's going to recur next year necessarily.
Fair.
And then also I put in $50,000 for investment income because your investment income has been trending very nicely. Last year it was just under 100,000, and I think we're actually at about 39 or 49,000 so far even this year.
And
So,
some might say that the stock market has taken a turn. What is the type of items that are generating our investment income, and why would you feel like they're still destined to make a decent contribution?
well, for one thing, this is a very conservative estimate.
Yeah.
It's about half of what we got in last year. And our money is invested. It's not just in a bank account. It's invested with Bartholomew Associates. They're an investment firm. They do our stabilization fund. They do our OPEB trust, and we've gotten pretty good returns from them. So I think 50,000 is reasonable. Because I do think that it's very likely that the state distribution will be even more than that and could offset that if there was a decline. And also the surcharge definitely has the potential to increase beyond the $1,575,000 just because property values have really risen, and that will also impact what we levy for the surcharge.
Sure.
So based on those numbers, the 5% admin cap would be $101,250, and then the minimum 10% would be the $202,500, which is where we get the amount that you'll see subsequently for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay.
So just to talk about state trust fund distributions a little more, this is a history of what they have been since inception, and cumulatively, we have received $9.2 million from the state since 2003. That's pretty incredible. So, and as you can see, the way the graph goes, you can see this gradual increase where it peaks to about a little over 800,000, and those were years where we were getting 100% match. Which was great, and then, a bunch of communities caught on. Obviously, they adopted the Community Preservation Act, and then the trust fund distributions went down a little bit. And then there was another little peak in 2000, I think that's 2014, which I think there were a couple of reasons for that. I think there were a lot of refinancing applications. There was a lot of activity at the Registry of Deeds. I think they might have even changed their fees too. And then it kind of leveled off, and then you've got this large distribution in 2022, this fiscal year. So what I'm recommending is based on that $2,025,000 that you appropriate the 5% for administrative expenses. You don't have to spend that if you don't. It's there if you need it. And if you don't use it, then it will just return to the undesignated fund balance at the end of the year. Your debt service is $505,888. And then you've got your annual budgeted reserve of $488.17. Basically, the annual budgeted reserve, it is really the plug for whatever you don't allocate somewhere else. and these amounts, basically take into consideration all the information that I received for the projects that were going into the warrant, into the draft warrant. So this is not obviously going to be one article. This is going to be several different articles. So it's in the order of the articles that I have. So the admin, the debt service, the annual budgeted reserve, that's all going to be, one article by itself. And then the individual projects will each have their own article. But some of those projects will be funded from the estimated revenues. So that's why we're showing it all together so that you can see the full impact of where the $2,025,000 is going.
Got it.
The town hall exterior restoration, the original appropriation for that is a borrowing. I would propose that you just fund it from historic resources reserves, because we do have money reserved in that category from 20 and 21.
What's the balance in that category, Wendy?
So the balance in, the balance in historic resources is the amount of the two projects that are proposed at $364,405.
Got it. So you're saying those are the balances from the 2020 and 2021?
Yes.
Got it.
So,
I understand.
Yeah, so you've got projects in here, so you might as well allocate them. So for the town hall restoration, I would say don't bother to borrow for this extra money. Just fund it from the reserves.
Understood.
Then you've got Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. That you can find from a combination of your estimated revenues for this year and then the remainder of the reserves that are left over for historic preservation. So that total is 507.6. That was the number that I received. And this is how I would break it up: the 368,195 from annual revenues and 139,405 from reserves.
Out of curiosity, Wendy, that 139,405, for example, were there projects that didn't get done that generated these reserves, or that didn't come in as expensive as we thought?
No, actually, what these reserves are, these are, so every year when you set your budget, you have to either reserve or spend 10% of each of the categories. In 20 and 21, we didn't have projects that met the totals, so that extra money had to be reserved.
Understood.
There is, however, which we can talk about later, but there are a number of older projects that I would like to see closed out. And that's something that the committee could vote and revisit at a later date. And like before I close the end of the fiscal year, you could vote on which projects could be closed, and I could close those out and still set that aside in a reserve based on the category that the project falls in.
I may have that list, Wendy, but if in your travels you could get that list and share it with me, that would be great. And then we can make it an agenda item in the near future so that we can get that housekeeping taken care of. That's a good point.
Excellent. Great. Okay, so then we got Oaks Ames Hall, Unionville Pickleball Court, 253,650 was the number I had. I would take that from estimated revenues. And then the Southeastern Cemetery fence, that's 105.5. Again, that can also come from the budget, and that will get you to your $2,025,000.
And so just for all of our sake, to take this list, and then if in fact we were able to proceed with the 555 Foundry Street, the amount requested would be $260,000. Then what would change, I'm assuming on this, Wendy, would be that the budgeted reserve amount of $488,000 would decrease by the $260 potentially. In its place would be a project for the fence at Foundry Street of $260,000. Is that a fair adjustment to this?
That's one of your options. I mean, you could certainly do that, but if you want to just keep it simpler and not have to amend this article, the budget article, after you voted on it, you could just take it out of your unreserved fund balance.
Which is how much?
I'm just looking for that right now. You've got more than enough money in that. You've got $5,750,069.
Just a little bit more than 260 grand.
You'll have no
Okay.
problem with that.
Okay.
So that is what I would propose. So, you know, we use up those reserves first for the historic projects. You still are gonna meet all of your spending requirements for your other categories with these projects, funding them from available revenues. And
Anybody have questions on this before Wendy moves on?
I actually have one.
Please.
Thank you, Wendy. Again, you've made this very clear, easy to understand, and I'm sure we'll have no issues, God willing, at town meeting. What's the majority of our debt service to?
open space. In fact, I think
Okay, thank you.
I think it's mostly open space.
I think you're right.
Yes, I have it all categorized as open space. So the debt that's outstanding is on the Dean Street land, the Chestnut Street fields, the Chestnut Street land and fields, Governor Ames preservation restriction, that's preservation, and then the Gill property.
And what's the time limit on the debt service as far as it being paid?
So Dean Street will be paid in fiscal 26. That's the final year of the payment. So 2027, that there will be no debt on that. The next one is Governor Ames Estate, the preservation restriction. That last payment is in fiscal 24. Chestnut Street goes to 2033, and the Gill property goes to 2035.
Okay, thank you.
And then as far as debt that you have that's authorized and unissued, there's just the town hall restoration of $1,450,000.
Wendy, what year did you say the Governor Ames estate was going to be paid off?
I have that as 2024.
Okay, that's what I have. Okay, thank you.
What's the normal term of this type of debt, Wendy?
It depends on what you're borrowing for. Usually with land, it's around 20 years.
Yeah.
If it's a smaller dollar amount, then you might want to not, string that out for 20 years, maybe 10 years or 15.
Sure. All right, not hearing any more questions. I think this was great.
Great. So we should go back to that other article for fiscal 22 then, if we're done with the fiscal 23 articles.
That works. That was Article 15 for 23 budget. Then I'm assuming you're referencing Article 24, Article 14 for the reservation of additional 2022 funds.
Yes. I'm not sure what numbers they are. I haven't seen the draft.
We have 47,570 for open space, historic resources, and community housing.
Yes. So, and so where that number comes from, this slide shows sort of how that was derived at. So the original budget had a surcharge of $1,525,000 and a state trust fund distribution of $250,000. We actually got $750,000, so $500,000 more than what we had budgeted. So that was a significant amount. Even if the budget didn't vary that much, then I would, just leave it as is. But this was such a large increase that it just seemed appropriate to, to really meet the law and, reserve that 10% that we needed this additional article.
Yep. And so the 10% is actually the 10% of that excess 475,697.
Yes.
And so the allocation of 10% of that amount to each of the three components would be 47,570, open space, recreation, historic resources, and community housing.
Correct.
Everybody kind of get that math and what we're trying to do?
What, excuse me if I can just ask a question, what happens to the other 70%?
So the other 70% was already,
In reserves?
it will just flow through to the unreserved fund balance at the end of the year.
Right, okay,
So, which is fine. It's just you have to reserve or spend the 10%. So we want to just make sure we get that taken care of with this article.
understood, thanks.
Good question. Those are the two items that we had Wendy teed up. Does anybody have any questions for Wendy before we offer her the great opportunity to get back to the rest of her evening? You're more than welcome to stay on, Wendy. I'm sure that it will be riveting and exciting, and I wouldn't blame you if you stayed, but you might have other things going on.
Yes, I will sign off after this. My daughter's home from college. She's starting her spring break a little bit early.
That's awesome. And Stephanie, if you don't mind, you may have already done it. I apologize if I missed it in the emails, but if we could just share this presentation with the committee, that would be fantastic.
We can do that. Wendy, if you would
I can
email that.
to you.
Thank you.
All right, Wendy, thank you so much. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Wendy.
See you. Stop my share and have a great night.
Awesome. You too.
Thank you.
Enjoy time with your daughter.
Thank you.
I think next up we have the 555 Foundry Street Iron Fence Preservation. Greg, if I'm not mistaken, I think you do have a presentation that you're willing to share with us on this particular item.
I do, and for the record, my pain medicine has suddenly worn off. So if I pass out, just text my wife and ask her to nudge me, please. So I'm going
to do that. Knowing where you live, I can get there pretty quickly. And
well, that sounds ominous.
I do, right? Yes. I do want to point out to everybody, I think we've all received them, but I do want to just make sure that the record's noted that we have received multiple notices of support. The most recent being from Timothy Hurley on behalf of the Easton Historical Commission in support of, and the entire Easton Historical Commission in support of this fence at 555 Foundry Street. I think his sentences here were pretty paramount. I know Greg will impress this upon us as well. But the monumental and intricately decorative iron fence prominently visible on the corner of Quanticut Ave and Foundry Street was created more than 200 years ago in the local metalworking factory from which the Furnace Village National Register Historic District takes its name. The other letters of support that I received were from Frank Menino and certainly the esteemed Mr. Hands, who is on this call as well. And so I just wanted to point those out. Yes, Stephanie.
If I could just, did you want to push the vote for the CPA articles to a different point in the meeting?
Oh, actually, you're right. We went over them, but we didn't take the vote. You know what? Since we've already covered them, I think it's important that we do take the vote to recommend. Let's just get those done. Sorry, Greg, for getting you fired up and making you wait longer on the pain meds, but
It broke my heart.
It'll be quickly. So what I would do is to take a vote to recommend Article 14, reserving additional FY 2022 community preservation funds in the amounts of $47,570 for open space, recreation, historic resources, and community housing. And take a motion in a second.
So moved. Strange.
Lee?
That's Strange and Lee. And so with that said, Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Rory,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Thomas is an aye, Dennis,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
and Meredith.
Aye.
Excellent. Next up, also we'll take a vote to recommend the CPA budget, article number 15, for the report and FY23 budget of the Community Preservation Committee. take a motion in a second.
So move, Lee.
Second, Hands.
That's Lee and Hands. Jim,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Rory,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Thomas is an aye. Dennis,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Excellent. Unanimous again. Stephanie, thank you for the catch. After all that discussion, to miss the 2 votes would have been terrible.
Yeah, thank
Greg.
you, Jane.
Absolutely. Greg, I promise you now, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, well, for the next 45 minutes, no, just kidding. that was on an episode of The Office I watched this morning, so I had to play that. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint. I'm going to give a quick blurb of just where we're at, how we got here, and then I've asked the local historian extraordinaire, Ed Hands, to speak a little bit, and then I'll circle back, check off a few boxes, and we'll try to get you through this quickly and painlessly. So it's amazing how often Zoom seems to change its share screen. Okay. Hopefully this works. All right, did you get it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so let me click to slideshow mode here. Okay, so 555 Foundry Street. Very quickly, over the past couple of years, the town, we amended the zoning of the Furnace Village District, basically all the way from, think of where Target and Avalon are, to 5 Corners. We have 5 sub-districts. Given how this is really a checkerboard neighborhood, goes from industrial to commercial, a little bit of historical, open space, back to business. In the middle, and this was done with numerous neighborhood meetings, all sorts of public hearings. You know, it was a really great, comprehensive, fun process to go through. A lot of input from the citizens. Anyways, I digress. So in the middle, we came up with the Furnace Village Residential District, which basically starts where Pequantucket is, if you think it there, and runs east to sort of where the subway shop is, in that neck of the woods. And this is all part of, most of that is part of the Furnace Village National Historic District. And we worked, we came up with a way to increase some density in this neighborhood, offer some diverse housing types to the residents, to all with the backdrop of trying to create and revitalize this district, create economic development, tying into the sewer that went down here and all. And so one of the possibilities in this district is, if you have enough land, you could increase your density. So Rick Lincoln, a developer who's done a few projects in town and who is working on permitting our first compact neighborhood district right across the street at the site of the old foundry, he purchased this historic leach house, and he's in the process of turning it into a duplex. He's been to historical commission, he came to planning board, and what he's doing with this house is he's pulling off this old portico, which this is not original. It's made from AZAC and other modern materials. He's revitalizing gorgeous leaded glass entranceway around the door. The windows, he's going back to period casing on it. Excuse me. He's adding a historically accurate garage, really bringing back the beauty of this. He's hired a landscape architect to do quite a bit of work. And then also, part of this district, he was able to subdivide 2 lots to the right of it, on the other side of these trees. And again, we had a process there, and all through special permit, we were able to, he's going, you think of this neighborhood, and there's an awful lot of federal, colonial, and colonial revival architecture from here. All, a pretty good amount of it still remains, and you think of it kind of travels right into the South Street neighborhood. So Mr. Lincoln has agreed, he worked with us, and he designed 2 houses that are slender, that fit the nice slender lots, and really tie into the period architecture. And the whole purpose of this is to try to bring back the beauty of this historical neighborhood. So when Rick first called me, he said, oh, what about that fence? I know a few people in town called me, and they'd like pieces of it if we're going to get rid of it. He goes, it's really in disrepair. He goes, but it'd be very, very expensive too, because it's so unique. And I said, and I was like, no, that fence has to stay there. That has to stay with the property. And just paint it black. I don't care if it's in, it's still strong enough. It's in decent shape. And so once I got to know a little bit more about the history of this, which Ed will get into in a second, approached Mr. Lincoln and said, boy, what if we were to, I didn't realize the significance of this fence at the time, honestly. And I said, what if we were able to seek CPA funding? Could you, contribute anything towards it? And would you allow the town to have a preservation restriction on it? So, and he was upfront, he was honest. He said, look, this is probably $250,000 to $300,000 to do this fence, given its uniqueness. And for what the property sells, I understand how the economics don't work. But he did say, if you're able to go forward with this, he goes, tell you what, I will, I have about 13,000 budgeted to paint it and stabilize a little bit. I'll give you that. And then later on, he came back once he looked at the proposals from DeAngelis, and he said, I'm going to do some landscaping around it, and I'll give you some I think I told him I'd love to have some interpretive signage there that tells the story, because it's such a great story. And it's in a really awkward granite base, which needs to be rebuilt and have footings put on. And he said he would take care of all that. And I said, okay, could you? Also, what we'd like you to do is take this all the way to fruition, pay for it, and then once it's done, and once we approve it to the Department of the Interior Standards, then we'd pay you. And he said, sure, we could do that. So he went ahead, got estimates from DeAngelis, and then approached us with it. And when I presented this to historical, one of the members said, I'd like to see him put more money into it. And I think it's important to point out that, because not everybody's going to know this, but the project across the street, the compact neighborhood, the town is receiving well over six figures in linkage and mitigation from Mr. Lincoln, in the form of there's going to be a traffic light and passing lanes added to Pequantucket and Foundry Street, which he's going to be funding, as well as funding a substantial amount of the redesign of the stretch of 106. The game plan is, hopefully within 10 years, this stretch will go through, we'll get curbs, sidewalks, bike lanes, more passing lanes. So it'll become modernized. And so the thought is this is one of Easton's oldest neighborhoods, to really bring it back. So I'm going to pause there, and Ed, I'll let you tell the story of the fence, if you will, and then I'll circle back.
I'd like to back up just a little bit and say that the founders of the Historical Commission, which actually predates me being on the commission, decided to create 3 National Register districts. The first one obviously was Northeastern. The second one was Bay Road. And the third one was Furnace Village, which way back in the late 60s, early 70s, was clearly recognized as our second industrial village. When I first came on the commission back in 1973, we were working on this. We thought we had the National Register District, so we spent our entire budget to put up the memorial that's now in front of the Swift store. That cost us $500. That was our entire budget. There was a snafu at Mass Historical, and it took us another 10 years to actually get the National Register District, at which point we took about half of our $500 budget and carved on the other side of that marker some more information. That was 1983, and I think that's the last dime of historic preservation money that's ever been spent in Furnace Village. Now Furnace Village is on the verge of becoming something that the founders of the Historical Commission could only dream of, a walkable neighborhood with historic houses, federal style houses, which are relatively rare in Easton. It wasn't a time when the town was very prosperous. And that brings us to this house. This house was built by Shepard Leach. His father was one of the people that were involved with the original foundry at Old Pond. And Shepard Leach expanded the business greatly and is generally considered to be the first man to become a millionaire in Easton. He was sort of a political rival of Oliver Ames and a political rival of Daniel Wheaton. And when Daniel Wheaton built his house up on Bay Road, Leach decided to build a similar style house with 4-foot larger proportions on either side. He died and did not have any children, so the property passed to his brother-in-law, Lincoln Drake. And Lincoln Drake is, we believe, the person who actually added the fence here. Very recently, the Historical Society has been going through its files. We have an archivist on staff temporarily, and we pulled out an old account book, which turned out to be the first account book of the Drake Foundry, probably the malleable iron foundry across the street, possibly the one that was still at Old Pond. And flipping it open, the first thing I saw was orders from the proprietors of locks and canals. That's in Lowell. Turning more pages, I found requests for castings for almost all of the textile mills in Lowell. As I said in the little blurb I wrote up for Greg, that's really significant because the creation of standardized parts for textile machinery is a big step forward in the Industrial Revolution. And it makes our little foundry, which previously had the reputation, oh, they made cannonballs for the Revolutionary War, a much more significant national feature. The same metal that made those castings is what made this fence. And for many years, we would argue that the reason that it lasted so long is the quality of the iron. It was a malleable iron made to be as rust resistant as possible. The design here is obviously a very beautiful and unique one. And I guess we can say, unfortunately, because that makes it expensive to repair. However, I think it really is of great national significance. It's really the last piece of the ironwork that helped build the Industrial Revolution in America. So as the district gets restored and gets to be walkable, and the new park across the street, across Pequannock Street, gets completed, this is going to become a neighborhood that people will be able to see without risking their lives. Having given tours down there, you can get run over very easily on a walking tour now, but in a few years, somebody else will be leading tours and showing off this really impressive piece of American history. And if nobody has any questions or hasn't fallen asleep, we can go back to Greg.
I guarantee to put you to sleep. So, okay, so let's quickly go through our slides. So here's a picture of it present day. Here is a slightly different angle, and we can see here's Swift's store, Meredith. I believe you're familiar with that building. And those who might not know, right over here, this is the Swift Park Ed was referring to, and there's a group in town just being put together to put a fence there. So, you know, the planner in me envisions, you know, look 10 years from now, this building is restored. Those in the foreground that we can't see have been restored and created. Hopefully this fence is gleaming black in all its majesty and beauty. There's a park here, right? You know, a set of lights. And, you know, you can see that this really has the makings to, this can become North Easton. This can become Brattle Street in Cambridge. This can become the Commonwealth Mall, you know, great history, great architecture. Here's a picture from 125 years ago. This front porch wasn't original, they've discovered. And that's why, but you know, you can see the fence. In fact, we have one view of this blown up so that if this funding is successful, DeAngelis will be using some of these photos to create the new pieces. And here's, I love it. You can see that in the foreground. That, you know, and here it is today. Now there's a giant fleur-de-lis and giant flowers that are missing on this, but you can just see the detail. I'll shoot you through some more pictures. And this is such a unique fence. Think of DeAngelis. How lucky we are. Probably the top firm for revitalizing cast iron, you know, any type of iron fence in the country is in our hometown. actually on the footprint of one of the original boundaries of this town. And they've been out here. The owner of the company came out and told me he's never seen a fence like this. He goes, this, and they go Harvard, MIT. They just did one at the Smithsonian. I mean, they do the top fences in the country. And here's that right. I love this picture. And here's right here where my mouse is. That's that same sort of Newell finial. And one last picture, so you can see this just sets, this just really sets the scene. It frames in this federal house wonderfully. And then you can just see some of the details, the uniqueness of these gates. All these castings again are missing. Will have to be come back. You can see this finial here. Part of the cost of this, I don't know if you read the proposal, they'll be dismantling this by hand, taking it back to their shop. Includes de-leading, but I don't think there's a speck of paint anywhere anymore. Sandblasting, bringing it down, recreating any parts that need to be, casting over 300 parts. These finials are solid. They have to go all around here. This is a 8 to 9 month project for this fence. So you can see just here's a standard run. Here's some pieces missing. And these are about 1.25 inches diameter, these rounds and squares, just to give you an idea. And you can see right here, earlier I was talking about the granite and the foundation. One design flaw in this, because obviously this was a one-of-a-kind fence that they made special for the owner. And you can see there's this piece of cast iron that runs right along the ground on this granite. This granite's only about 8 inches deep. Frost line around here is 4 feet deep, which means, during cold winters, that up to 4 feet freezes. So that granite's moving all over the place, which caused the iron to move all over the place, which caused it to crack. Iron can be brittle. So much of this, all of these pieces have to be replaced. They're all broken. And so Rick is, he's offered to handle the masonry part of this and any footings that need to be done. And without a doubt, the coolest part of this fence is the center gate pivots. And think of it, how old is this fence at 220 years?
I can't do the math.
It's pretty old.
1820.
So 200 years, right?
Yeah.
So look at this. Dangerous have never seen one of these. Center pivot gate still runs true to this day. This thing stops on a dime. He was blown away. He offered to buy the whole fence. He's like, I want this. This is for an architectural junkie like me. This is such a unique, fantastic piece in our backyard. I live up the street from here. I can't believe I've driven by this 5,000 times and never knew that gate. So, anyways, just another picture up close of the detail. You can see some of the damage here. I'm sensing this aluminum is probably not original. So it's kind of have a Rube Goldberg effect. Okay, so now the sales pitch. To me, this is the restoration of a district, not the restoration of a house. The reason we had to push this through, if you remember, I said, this project, they'll be going to condo. Much easier to deal with one owner right now who has a record of cooperating and collaborating with the town. And is just as interested in saving the history of the town as we are, than 2 unknown future property owners, especially where we'd want a preservation restriction on this, so the fence cannot be taken down, it needs to be maintained, has to remain black, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at this map, you see these red dots, and Stephanie, someday you have to teach me on that map how to get rid of the zoning districts. I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. But each one of these dots, these red dots, represents a CPA project that was funded. Now, and we all know, I'm not breaking any news when I say the majority are in Northeastern. We know Northeastern is resource rich. What blew my mind was the fact that while Northeastern has received upwards of $10 million in funding, Furnace Village has not received 1 penny. And if we go to, as I put in the application, from the Eastern Community Preservation Plan, the CPA plan of 2020, areas outside of Northeastern should be focused on. From the Historic Preservation Plan, preserve the integrity of Eastern's historic neighborhoods. And from the from the same plan, from the action plan, work to preserve historical landscapes and scenic roads. So what better way to start the revitalization of one of our oldest villages than to restore this historic fence, which was born from in this very district from this very soil of this town and hasn't left town for 200 years. I know it sounds corny, but you know, I had to. To those who say, ooh, you know, why is there not more of a substantial match? I think I've tried to lay out the reasons why. And I went back and I studied every one of our CPA projects, and the vast majority do not have what I would call a substantial match. And this would be in the upper third of those matches. And for those who, someone had brought up at one point, well, this is on private property. I went back, I studied every project. 63% of our approved CPA projects have been on private property. So there's really no dangerous precedent being set here. Again, I ask you to try and have the vision for what this could be. It would be a shame to lose this. I mean, you know, worst, if this doesn't pass, yeah, Rick's gonna paint it, try to, you know, put some nuts and bolts in it. And maybe we get another 20 or 30 years out of it before it really falls apart. But we wouldn't have a preservation restriction on it. You know, and the people that buy it could use it as a clothesline, or they could tear it down for scrap. And this is a one-of-a-kind fence. And, you know, 30 years ago, my son Austin, who's now 33, I had him on my shoulders. We lived on Center Street. I went up behind the library. I had no idea there was we used to call it the hidden haunted garden. There was this stage and all these statues all overgrown. It was like being in a horror movie. And years later, some folks went to the town and tried to muster support to revitalize the Quisa Gardens. And those of us with, you know, that support history and, oh, that's great. A lot of people said, oh, it's too much money. It'll be a waste of money. That's probably one of the top 5 visited sites in town right now. And, you know, 10 years from now, when we have sidewalks and all, I fully expect Ed Hands and Ed's Hands of the next generation, whoever that is, to be out there giving tours talking about this. So I think this project checks all of the boxes of what we look for in a CPA project. I'll let you get on with your evening. I thank you for your time.
Greg, thank you. And Ed, thank you too. And you know, just first of all, I do want to thank you both for being the advocates that I think is really important as a role we all play being on this committee. You know, it's our job to understand what this committee does and then go out into the community, whether it's on our respective boards or whether it's in our respective journeys, and try to identify good application of the CPC funds on behalf of our residents in our community to do and explore projects exactly like this. So, Greg, thank you for very quickly engaging on this, raising the opportunity. And Ed, certainly thank you, and to the Historical Commission for engaging so that we can be informed and be educated about the opportunity that's before us. I do want to afford folks the opportunity to ask questions of Greg and Ed. And then I would also, there was a point that Greg had raised regarding the private aspect of this particular property. And I certainly clearly heard his point, but I do want to make sure I give Stephanie and or Wayne the opportunity to inform us regarding the utilization of funds for private property to ensure we understand the potential ramifications that may occur down the road or the right steps we may want to explore to do this. I don't think in any way it prohibits us from exploring this great opportunity. I just want to make sure everybody's informed and understands. So any questions or thoughts or observations or feedback to the presentation that Greg gave and that Ed participated in?
Excuse me, I do.
Please.
As was stated, the Historical Commission voted unanimously in favor of this with one abstention. To say this is a iconic fence piece of artwork, as far as I'm concerned, is an understatement. This fence belongs to this property, without a doubt. I mean, as many years I've driven by, and you first actually look at the fence before you look at the house, and it's got the wow factor. So with that said, I'm in unanimous support of this. Just a couple of points. We've actually had, to my tenure on the commission, which has been about 25 plus years, we have had some, I can think of just one right off the top of my head, an iconic fence where we didn't go forward with. And so I just want to make it clear that it might be addressed. Not positive, who knows, but we have had one fence particularly that comes to mind. The second thing, and I always think ahead, it's a large amount of money. What are the repercussions? Oh, that's lack of a better word. Coming forward with these projects, and all of a sudden it's underbidded, meaning that it's going to be now 350,000. Do we have any guarantees with this project, or its guarantees are unheard of today? That's my first question. The second question seems trivial, point seems trivial, but after we spend close to $300,000 or total, and again, it looks trivial, but the shrubbery and stuff around that fence, I want that to be shown incomplete. I don't know if you noticed, the left side of that fencing is pretty much overgrown with shrubs. I know that's the way it might have been. I don't know exactly. I just looked at it roughly. Ed, you might be able to address this more, but and I think that's pretty much all I have to say. But a great project. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Greg, for all the work put onto this. I think we can all know that this will be addressed at town meeting. So in regards to personal property, and as long as we can nip that in the bud, I think we'll be good to go.
Chair, can I answer the question?
Please do.
So, John, and thanks for the support. In terms of your questions, Mr. Lincoln, and I should say Mr. Rick's on vacation. He had planned to join us tonight. The itinerary changed out of his control, and I believe he's on a plane right now, so that's why he's not with us. But he checked in with the DeAngelis a couple of weeks ago to make sure everything was the same, and they're good. And he says, Greg, if this costs me any more money, he goes, I'll take care of it. And he said if it comes in less, he'll alert the town and take less. And that's why, and you're sort of like we used to do it in the old days. He's going to have to take the whole project all the way through. We don't give him a penny until it's done, it's complete, and we inspect it and make sure it's to the Secretary of the Interior standards, which it will be with DeAngelis. And the second question, and Ed, I know that Mr. Lincoln is hiring a landscape architect for the whole property. And the driveway, that picture I showed, I won't put it back up, but you think of this sort of like a U-shaped driveway and one almost comes out to 106. He's actually eliminating about at the front half of that driveway. So between Pequantucket and the fence, and of course some of that land's probably going to be gone when the lights go in anyways, but there'll be much more green space there, less pavement, and yeah, the fence will be proud. We'll be proud of any shrubbery.
Thanks.
If I could jump in here for just a sec on the legal question. Someone asked me about the feasibility of another project. So I actually went and looked stuff up today. And what we're essentially doing here is we're buying a preservation restriction on this property. And that's what makes it legally permissible.
And I would echo that is in fact what we've heard from town council. The question that the committee will need to consider, just like any preservation or conservation restriction, there's a value associated with that. And, Wayne can correct me if I say anything wrong here, but you'd need some kind of an appraisal of the value of the property, probably of the property with the fence as it exists and with it as it's restored, and what the value of the preservation restriction would be. And that's so that the town is not in violation of the Anti-Aid Amendment, which mandates that any town cannot benefit a private individual or organization beyond the value that the town is deriving from whatever they're getting. So, some of the conversations we've had recently in executive session have revolved around that as well.
Thank you.
If I may, that's the first I've heard of that. I mean, I find, so are you saying that if the property value doesn't go up by, 250,000, which I don't see how a fence could do that. As I said before, the value of this fence is to the district more than it is to the property. That just concerns me.
Well, again, we're raising kind of what needs to be considered, and probably would need to be run by town council to weigh in further. And that's basically what they said. Until the council really knows what this would look like, it's kind of hard to speak to that.
Do we have to do appraisals on? Oh, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Ed, I see you there next. I just want to make one comment real quick. I would agree, Stephanie, with some of the premise of what Greg is saying, which is value is in the eye of the beholder, and
Right.
the at times that the item in question may be valued by one and therefore not necessarily have it manifest itself in a house value. So I think that is something we should pretty quickly try to understand, because I do believe the historical value to our community may far exceed or may exceed what the impact might be to a housing value to somebody who's looking at it as a investment property or to move in and live.
Right, and that was just an example I was given, but again, I think really what you want is, once you know what you're doing, we need to have town council weigh in.
Understood. Mr. Hands, I know you wanted to.
Yeah, I would suggest, and I don't know, this would be something I'd like to hear town council talk about. I don't think it has anything to do with the value of the house. I think we're buying a preservation restriction on the fence, not the house. It's a unique art object, as John has pointed out. Its value is going to be high, and the fact that we're buying a restriction on that should meet the criteria, regardless of whether there's a house there or not.
Fair point. John, and then Amanda.
One last point is I'm assuming this is an insurable restriction on this fence. So what happens if a tractor trailer goes by and slams into this and we just lost our investment?
Yeah, part of the insurance for the condo association he's agreed will be written to handle the cost of this, so we don't have the same issue we did with the Lincoln Street School a decade ago.
Exactly. You read my thoughts.
I'm with you, John.
And Greg, I assume that answer would also suffice to address Meredith's comment in the chat, which is who would it be insuring the fence in the event that there was a car accident? And I'm assuming it's not just if the fence was damaged, but if somebody was hurt, items like that. That would all be on the insurance policy and the landowners.
You had me worried for a minute. I was like, I didn't hear Meredith ask a question.
So
yes.
I'm sorry, Greg, you're saying that the homeowners association would be responsible for insuring the fence?
Yeah, just about the first conversation I had with Rick Lincoln regarding this, I was thinking back to the Lincoln Street School where we had this exact case, and I brought it up, and he said that they'd take care of it.
I would make sure.
Give a refresher on the Lincoln Street fence, just to let the rest of us know what that situation looked like.
John, you want?
Yeah, I could speak to that. The fence was restored as part of the project. It was struck by a high school student, and the insurance on neither the property nor the automobile damage insurance was enough to cover the historic replacement of the fence. So it could be replaced with lesser material, which is ultimately what Doug did, but it was not, it was not replaced to Department of the Interior standards.
And I think that's an important point, Ed, because if the homeowners association is going to be required to maintain an insurance policy, it should be specifically for replacement in kind of any damage to the fence, and not just a dollar amount, which I think is probably what, I don't know if the fence in particular, in the case of it was the Lincoln Street School, right?
Correct.
if it was just covered under that, or if there was a specific clause in the insurance and there was a maximum dollar amount, but you'd
Can
want
I
to.
Before we go,
Can I just, one other further concern I have with respect to that is there'll be new owners from time to time in the property, and how can we be assured that the insurance policy continues forward from one owner to the next to make sure that there's proper coverage to cover our investment there? Who's going to follow up on that, or how is that done? Thank you.
I think the town council would have to provide some language for the restriction. I think that would be a covenant of some sort that would need to be included in that. I don't think it's something that any of us can answer, although I think
It would have to follow the deed.
I have my hand up because in back of Swift Store, there's Harmony Hall, which actually has a preservation restriction on it. One of my concerns is that restriction is held by the Historical Commission, and other than perhaps Wayne and Tim, I'm not sure anybody is, checking to make sure that that's maintained. Conservation restrictions in town are maintained by the holder of the restriction, checking on a regular basis that the provisions are held up. And as you point out, Amanda, that would be written into the restriction, and whoever held the restriction would be responsible for making sure the insurance policy was still in effect.
If I could make a quick suggestion to whomever is working with Rick, if there could be a particular note in the condominium documents, because from one owner to the next, the condominium documents are delivered. And although there may be a restriction noted on the deed, that's not always really seen by the owners. It's done by their attorneys, and that could be something that really could be missed, where the unit owners themselves will definitely see the condo documents, and that's one way for them to be mindful of that. Could be put in the rules and regulations or something like that.
Great idea.
Before we go further, I do just need to pause. Amanda, I think you had raised your hand earlier. I don't know if your
I did, no.
No.
I did want to say I agree with Ed's comment on the methodology for the valuation. I think the great expense of this fence is exactly the reason why we have CPA funds for preservation, because it would be out of the reach of the condo owners, and this fence is literally priceless, and no one but CPA could act really. Or would act to preserve it. So I'm fully supportive.
Appreciate that. Wayne, you had your hand raised as well. And once we wrap up our discussion, I do want to preserve just a moment or two for Dale Carrister, who has been patient and expressed a desire to vocalize his support as well. So Wayne?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to respond to Ed. So the Historical Commission holds about 8 or so preservation restrictions. The members do try to monitor them. They haven't much in the past. Harmony Hall was monitored in October of 2014, and everything was in decent shape then. At our most recent Historical Commission meeting, we did have an agenda item to try and restart our monitoring visits so that we do check in on the preservation restrictions. But yes, it is an ongoing responsibility that would have to be taken into account to pay attention to preservation restrictions held by the town.
I just want to point out that I was there for that monitoring in 2014, and at that point I was in good condition also.
Ed, you're still in good condition. Just going to throw that out there.
Always.
If there isn't more discussion on our committee, I would welcome Dale. Dale, thank you for joining and taking interest, as you always do, in important town matters. But would love to give you an opportunity to voice your support.
Thank you, Tom, and I'll be brief. For those who don't know, I live at 21 South Street, so I'm just sort of around the corner. been here since 1993. We also have a Drake in the lineage of this property where I am, a Hiram P. Drake. And I knew at one point the relationship between Hiram and Lincoln, but I don't recall now. But I had actually read the history of Easton by the Reverend Clayton long ago, but don't recall the details. For those who don't know, I've been one of the organizers, along with Neil Levine and some others, of the Furnace Village Neighborhood Collaborative Group. We were the folks who worked with the town, with Stephanie, with Connor, and with Michael with respect to the SOAR project for the area, and in a very collaborative way. And I've kept that group active for a variety of reasons. I try to keep folks notified about town meetings, zoning changes, and so forth. And I've also spoken in favor of the recent zoning changes to our area. I feel very strongly about this area and the historic nature of it. I think this particular project could be a signature piece of the puzzle as we move forward. I'm hopeful to keep this group, the Furnace Village Neighborhood Collaborative Group, mobilized in support of and working with the town to ultimately do things along the lines of getting some street lamps along the way, similar to what they've done on Main Street. And I think that's a vision that Connor has expressed. So I would be thrilled if ultimately this project were to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And thank you for keeping that collaborative open. I remember very well all the great effort you folks did back in that sewer district discussion phase, and it was incredibly valuable and led, I think, to much more positive outcome than we could have had without you folks collaboratively working. So greatly appreciated. Any other questions? It would seem, first of all, I guess it would seem that there is very large support for this. I think the only people that haven't vocalized their support officially that I haven't heard are Dennis, Rory, Meredith. I also support it. I think that the level of community engagement, the level of historical commission support, I think we all recognize, and Amanda, you said it well, that there are opportunities for this particular committee to do things that might not otherwise be done in the preservation of historical components for our community. So I certainly support it. But I do want to reserve the right if there are others that want to debate or have discussion that don't support it before we task, I think, Stephanie with potentially going and getting some additional information and clarity from town council.
I'll jump in and offer my support of it. I live in 02375 and drive by this location many times a day. My parents own that office building adjacent to the location where the fence is. I'm really excited that some money is going to be spent in this part of town, particularly for this type of project. And Ed, Greg, for you folks spearheading it, it's wonderfully exciting to see this. And additionally, to have sidewalks in that part of town, because my concern for many years has been that folks do walk from the intersection where Target is towards Shaw's, and there's a tremendous solar glare, and I've been really afraid that someone would get killed in that location because regardless of a sidewalk there, they do walk. So that's pretty exciting to have a light there because of the increased traffic. But the preservation is really awesome, and I'm very excited about it.
Thanks, Meredith. Rory?
Yeah, so first, I think that most of what was covered already. I did have my hand raised before, but I think everybody kept on saying everything I had to say about it. And I think certainly the one key point here is this is just one part of the puzzle that's going on here. And I think Greg touched on it. The development going on across the street will be another key piece of what this part of the town and revitalization will happen. And it's nice to see that part of town seeing these kind of improvements, and I really look forward to it, and I do support the project.
Thank you, sir. Dennis?
I'm in complete support of the project, and I give my thanks to Greg and Ed for the presentation. After that, I don't know how you could say no to such a unique piece of a unique structure within our community that's we're well versed in saving. Thank you.
Was it more me or Ed that got to you?
Ed,
Yeah.
Greg, you did a very persuasive job.
For the record, I think that was about the quickest confirmation of Ed that I've heard, Greg. It was almost like an instant call of Ed, but I think you did a great job too.
It's hard to go up against Papa Smurf. He's undefeated.
Jim, I just want to make sure you also had an opportunity to voice your support or ask any questions.
Anything that is more historic than Ed, I think, deserves support in the community.
Well said. So does it make sense then that we would just ask Stephanie to go back to town council? If Stephanie, you wanted to make sure that Greg, myself, were available to participate if you needed our participation, or
I was just going to suggest that town council is in the office this coming Tuesday at 10 o'clock. If either you or Greg are available and want to join us, we can do it by phone too, if that works better.
Yeah, I think I can join this Tuesday at 10. I think, Greg, do you want to join by phone, or I'm going to pick you up? I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
sure if
probably
you're
best.
driving
I think
these
I'm
days.
up. Let's see, Tuesday. Yeah, I can do it by phone.
Okay.
Okay,
So we'll firm that up, Stephanie, if it's okay with the committee. Greg, myself, and Stephanie will talk to town council, and hopefully what we'll do is be able to come back to this committee and put forth an opportunity to vote and get this one on the list for our town meeting.
Tom, is it possible to have a vote contingent upon approval by town council?
I think it is contingent upon satisfactory town council, just a vote of recommendation for this application. Does anybody have any issue with that? It's a great point, Jim.
I would make that motion if it's seconded.
I'll second it.
That's Lee and Hans. Right back at you, Jim.
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Rory?
Can you just repeat the motion?
Yeah, the motion would be to accept the application in its present form, contingent upon satisfactory discussions with town council.
Thank you.
Certainly. To be had by Greg, Stephanie, and myself as a subcommittee, I guess, of this particular committee.
And to recommend to the select board for inclusion on the warrant.
Correct.
Good point.
Mr. Ventresco?
Just a point, I'm assuming that everything that we brought up tonight, all the bullet proofs, will be put into a doc and addressed.
Yes, ultimately it would be there would be an article that would come before us for a recommendation. So Wayne, I think we have to wait to have the actual article written for us to create the recommendation to the select board.
yes.
But I think we can, what was that, Stephanie?
I was agreeing.
Yeah.
Because
So
you would
I think-
want,
Go
you would
ahead.
want the article and the explanation to include all the contingencies, and, you know, the information and around the preservation restriction and how it would function.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so then theoretically, depending on what town council says, there would be something in writing, a warrant that could be voted on at the April meeting to recommend?
Correct.
Thanks.
And John, to answer your question, all the suggestions on how this might work, and having the homeowners association be required to maintain adequate insurance for replacement in kind. Meredith talking about the condo documents, which I believe are the homeowner association documents. But we will just walk through all of that with town council.
Thank you.
And anything else, Greg or Tom?
No, I think that covers it. Greg, from your end?
I have a plethora of questions, but I'll save them for Mr. Tellerman.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Same here. So that was Jim was an aye, Greg was an aye, Rory,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
myself, I am an aye. Dennis,
aye.
John,
Aye.
Amanda,
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Excellent. Dale, thank you again for your time. Greg, Ed, thank you again for your efforts putting together a good presentation. Next up on our agenda, we have an update on the Unionville field revitalization, also known as the pickleball amendment. Stephanie, Wayne, you want to just give us an
Yeah,
update on where we're at?
That's me, and this will be the quickest item on the agenda tonight. I just wanted to let everyone know that we published the invitation to bid last week. The responses are due April 12th. I've been told by Holmgren Engineering, who is managing the bid processing, that they've already received an inquiry. So I hope that's a good sign that we get many more.
Good. I know we have some folks on that have historically talked about the pickleball courts. Dick or anybody, Bert, is there any comments or anything that you folks might have? I appreciate you staying on with us while we were able to get to this one.
I don't see any raised hands.
I do not either. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next one, which is the solicitation and proactive outreach and discussion. This is, I think we spoke about it, or I spoke about it earlier, because there was a specific and fantastic example of what I think we wanted to cover today. And one is just to ask everybody to continue and express my appreciation for your continued efforts of, as you go back to your respective boards or committees, of keeping in mind, keeping an eye out for those projects that the CPC can engage on. And, you know, I think there's no better example than what Greg and Ed brought before us in an expedited fashion with the fence. But, you know, if there are ways that you can go out, not just to your committees, but in the broader community, that think that is something at our next, perhaps our next meeting, maybe the following meeting in May, that I would really love to engage our team on, to discuss how we can bring the CPC and what we do to the masses, to educate, to be proactive. And that will include, you'll get from me later on this week, maybe over the weekend, an email. Recently I was forwarded some best practices from the Community Preservation Coalition of what other cities and towns do, whether it's their application process, whether it's their outreach efforts, general criteria and decision guidelines for project proposals, you know, what the application forms look like. Just an opportunity for us to really step back and reflect on how we go out and proactively solicit, foster, and generate application ideas. So there isn't necessarily anything for us to discuss tonight. I just wanted you all to know that you'll be getting a plethora of information from me in the days to come. And the goal will be that we can synthesize all of the best practices, including our own. We may get back and say we like what we do, that's fine too. But there's always a great opportunity to step back and say, how do other people do it? What can we glean as best practices? And how can we continue to demonstrate the value that the CPC has the opportunity to help create in our community? Hopefully that made sense. Yes, sir, Rory?
So one thing that I know that I started to do about 6 months ago with our group is that I started adding to the agenda the meeting following this meeting. And ours, we meet twice a month. And so it's just to get a report from the CPC representative. And sometimes it isn't a lot of stuff that have to do with conservation, but it does sort of increase the visibility and awareness to at least that board. And we're also, whoever public is watching it, about what's going on, and sort of continuing to sort of spread the word about the good work this committee and the fund is doing for the town of Easton. So I think that's probably a good practice for all of us to take back to our respective boards if we're representatives of those boards.
You know, that's a great point, Rory. And you talk about what this fund overall is doing. And I reflect back on the slide that Wendy showed us tonight of how much the state matched us. And I thought it would be interesting to superimpose how much we ourselves as a community funded, and then adding those together. Because if the state was funding us X millions of dollars, 9.2, I can tell you we certainly funded a lot more than 9.2 million as a community. And we've done an awful lot of great work as a committee with a lot of really great parties in our community to bring benefit. So to your point, there's a lot of good going on. I think the better we can share it.
We funded 18.6, just FYI.
Thank you. Yeah, in total. So that's 18.6 plus the 9.2.
Correct.
27.8 million. That's impressive. That's a really strong community commitment to the pieces, obviously, that the CPA is designed to support. Johnny on the spot with the numbers, Greg. Well done.
Well, I didn't know how deep I had to go in the presentation. In fact, fun factoid, the fence, which I so passionately argued for, is 2.62% of the free money that we have received from the state in the 20 years.
Well done. Okay, so that's all what the purpose of this was. Stay tuned for information to come my way. Wayne, Stephanie, or team, any comments or thoughts for other aspects regarding solicitation and proactive outreach?
We will also have, we've gotten several letters of interest for submitting applications this fall for funding next spring. So we should discuss those. I think they're due in April. So we should certainly discuss the letters of interest we've gotten and prospective projects to consider at either the April or May meeting as well.
Well said. The other aspects that we'll get into is, potentially Facebook posts, making sure we're leveraging the town crier, all the, I guess what I'd call standard outreach mechanisms to the town website, but just trying to be as proactive as we can.
ECAT is another good mechanism. In the past, Wayne and I have appeared. I know Jim and Meredith were scheduled at least to do an ECAT session to kind of talk about some of the projects and what would be coming up at upcoming town meetings, so people are informed and aware.
Excellent.
Jim, let's get back doing it. You got very busy.
Yeah, Tom might be more appropriate to be in there.
I don't know, Jim. I think your voice, people love to hear it. But I'd be happy to. Update on the Citizens Academy, Stephanie. Did you just want to give a quick update on that?
So this is basically a Citizens Academy is being formed. It's an opportunity for interested residents to learn more about the town government, how it works, and how they can participate. There'll be a variety of classes and interactive activities. It's really goal is to interest people in ongoing participation in municipal government, such as your participation in this board and all the other board members. The application process is open and applications are due by March 25th. You can go to the town's website. There is a page for the Citizens Academy. The link is included in the agenda for this meeting. So members of the public, anyone who watches this session on ECAT, you can go to the CPC agenda for today and click on the link, and it will provide you more information about the Academy, and will bring you to a link for the application to apply.
Hopefully you'll be using taglines like, nobody has more fun on a Thursday night than we do.
Love it. Love it. All right. I think that's the last item that we had for regular business. We will be entering into executive session under Purpose 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. As having an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, and we will not reconvene in open session. Stephanie Danielson, Renee LaPierre, and Wayne Beitler will also be joining us in that executive session as well. And again, I just want to emphasize not to reconvene for open session. So with that, I would take a motion to enter in executive session in a second.
So moved, Sheedy.
Second, Lee.
That's Sheedy and Lee. Jim?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Rory?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Thomas is an aye. Dennis?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
And Meredith.
Aye.
Excellent. Stephanie, you'll work your magic, and thank you for those people in the community that joined tonight's call. Very much appreciated.
All right, here we go.